All right, world, it's great to be back with you once again. I'm Sam Lichtenstein, one of your directors of analysis here at Stratfor Rain. I'm here with one of my colleagues, Charlie, who's going to introduce himself in just a second. But I'm super excited today because, unlike in past times where I've been coming to you from freezing New York, I'm currently in sunny Florida. I got palm trees outside, so it's Friday. Nothing can keep me down. Charlie, where are you coming to us from today?
Hey, Sam, I'm coming to you from Austin, Texas. I'm a global security analyst with Rain. I don't know if Sam mentioned, but I've been with the company for a little bit. I handle both Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa, and I handle jihadism and terrorism issues. And that's kind of what I'm here to talk to you guys about today. Well, Sam will introduce us on the queue
Yeah,
on the forecast
I'm
here.
really, I mean, I hate to say that I'm excited to talk about these topics because that doesn't seem like the right word, but unfortunately, they're still really relevant. And what's is exciting is that we get to talk right before we are publishing our second quarter forecast for both our Worldview and Threat Lens platforms. Those are going to be coming out on Monday. I cannot say that we will get any cut of any subscribers that come in for that, but I will do my part in making our pitch to say, please go to stratfor.com, sign up for our services. You can get access to this and a lot more of the information that we're going to be forecasting in Q2. But with that, Charlie, I know with so much in the news, obviously being dominated by Ukraine, you have all of these other topics that just haven't been getting the necessary attention. And I know
Yeah.
one of the things, of course, you follow for us very closely is jihadist threats. So take us through a little bit of an overview. What are we talking about in our second quarter forecast here?
Right. Well, so obviously jihadist threats haven't gone away. They remain particularly relevant, especially within the Middle East, but also Sub-Saharan Africa, as I'll touch on later. Um, in Q2, we have Ramadan coming up, and Ramadan has historically been associated with fairly significant terrorist attacks. Kind of as a perfect storm or a constellation of events, we also have the recent death of al-Qurayshi, the leader of Islamic State Corps in Syria and Iraq. And so there is both a driver and impetus on Islamic State to conduct serious attacks following Qurayshi's death, as well as opportunities. So Ramadan, obviously in the Middle East, you're going to have gatherings that are going to provide potential targets for IS attacks. And Syria and Iraq are the big places that we're watching because of IS's persistence in those two countries. They maintain a significant presence in central Iraq, obviously, and then also eastern Syria.
And obviously, I mean, we saw just this in the past few weeks a number of really escalatory attacks from IS in both countries that really took people by storm. I mean, can you remind us there was a prison attack in Syria that really got a lot of people's attention, right?
Yeah, it would have been back in January. It was an attempt to storm a major prison in eastern Syria that was holding Islamic State detainees. It was a fairly coordinated attack attempting to free detainees, and it really shows that IS, at least in eastern Syria, remains a significant threat, or at least retains significant capabilities as far as being able to free detainees and being able to launch attacks and avoid both Kurdish security forces as well as U.S. intelligence forces to conduct such a raid. So,
Now, I mean, aside from Eastern Syria, where let's be honest, we don't exactly have a
yeah,
lot of our readers or
yeah,
clients that
yeah,
are
no,
going to, hopefully not, at least if you
yeah.
are, highly advise you to change your travel plans. But where else in the world, Charlie, I mean, should we be looking in the next quarter for potential uptick in jihadist violence?
I would look at, first of all, Lebanon. And the reason I say Lebanon is because there was a significant incident. It was a few months ago where Islamic State attempted Lebanese security forces disrupted a planned Islamic State cell that was planning attacks on Shiite targets in Lebanon. It seemed to be a fairly advanced plot. Um, and it seemed that as though that it was fairly well planned and timed. And the another reason why Lebanon is particularly economic in a particularly poor economic state right now, and so particularly among which is fallen hard on Sunnis in Lebanon as well as Palestinian refugees who have been long-term refugees in the country. And so there's fairly good evidence that Islamic State is seeking to recruit from Lebanon.
I mean, it seems to me like just one more horrible thing that this poor country has to suffer with. I mean,
Yep,
you're already
yep,
dealing with so many strains. I mean, the idea that there could be potential IS cells trying to exploit this is I mean, I can't even
yep, yep,
imagine how the
yep.
already stretched security forces, how do you deal with this?
Yeah, that's, it's really at a point where a serious Islamic State attack, particularly if it targeted a significant Shiite gathering. So something along the lines of the November 2015 Borj al Barjani bombing, for example, that killed over, I think it was 200 was the casualty count in that. If something like that were to happen now, it could have very significant impact on the sectarian situation in Lebanon. It could cause, Hezbollah to conduct sectarian attacks on random reprisals against Sunnis in Lebanon. It could have a lot of different second and third order impacts given the current situation of affairs in Lebanon right now.
Yeah, you're not exactly painting a rosy picture, unfortunately, here. And I mean, obviously, we're still talking hypothetical, but
Yeah,
one place that sadly has not been hypothetical, but been really real, has been in portions of Israel and the Palestinian territories recently, right? I
yeah,
mean, even
yeah.
earlier this week, we saw quite a significant attack by a lone individual, right?
Yes, in it was in Beersheba in southern Israel, an Islamic State, a person who had previously been in custody for Islamic State sympathies, stabbed and killed 4 people in Israel. It was a combined stabbing and run over attack, and it's unclear at this point if there's more Islamic State sympathizers in Israel ready to conduct such attacks, or if this is a one-off. That being said, if Islamic State will certainly exploit this one for propaganda value, and certainly there are concerns about Islamic State recruiting within the Arab communities in Israel, especially in the Negev desert. Um, their recruiting activity was higher back in that 2015, back in Islamic State's heyday, but obviously the recruits can stay dormant for a fairly long time, and it can be a fairly long time between radicalization when they actually conduct an attack. So,
And I
and
mean, also in Israel, you of course have the
yeah,
Passover holiday that will be
yeah,
coinciding with Ramadan again this year.
yeah,
Also happens to coincide with Easter. So, I mean, if you're really
yeah,
thinking about like a symbolic perspective, doing
hmm
something over a weekend where you have Ramadan, Passover, and Easter all coinciding can be, I mean, really symbolically valuable for Islamic State propaganda or the propaganda of course, any jihadist group in the region.
indeed, and it really only adds to the militancy problems that we've seen in Israel and the West Bank. Not to go off on too big a tangent, but also we obviously still have Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad to worry about. So adding Islamic State to that just adds more for Israeli security forces to keep an eye on.
Again, you're not exactly inspiring confidence here in terms of the threat level, but I mean, let's take a little bit of a world detour because I know one of the big trends you've been following, Charlie, is that even as Islamic State has faced a lot of resistance in the Middle East, I mean, this and other groups really only seem to be growing in parts of particularly West Africa and the Sahel. I mean,
Yeah.
what are we looking at in terms of threat levels there in the next quarter?
So jihadist groups in the next quarter in West Africa, we're going to see them exploiting particularly volatile political situations in both Burkina Faso and also Mali. In Burkina Faso, we had a coup that was in some part caused by recent uptick in jihadist violence. Um, a key factor in the coup was an attack in late 2021 that killed a large number of Burkina Faso gendarmerie, and that caused a significant backlash against the government and the civilian-led government and its failure to deal with the violence. So, going forward, the Jemaat Nusra al-Islam wal-Muslimin, the primary Al Qaeda affiliate in Burkina Faso, in particular, is likely to continue attacks in the region.
Well,
And
the thing that interests me a lot, Charlie, and what you've been looking at for our Q2 forecast is actually how what's going on in Ukraine with Russia is actually having a secondary impact
Yep.
on the security situation in the Sahel. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Sure, that's particularly true in Mali. So in Mali, we have kind of a perfect storm. We have the French that are gradually withdrawing from Mali, given poor relations with the Malian government. They're going to be withdrawing over the next 4 to 6 months. And then simultaneously with that, we have a decreased Russian presence in the country. Russia was present in the country militarily as an effort to supplant waning French influence there. But it appears more likely than not that the Russians will also be withdrawing a significant capability to go fight in Ukraine. So the Malian government will essentially be left holding the bag against jihadism, not entirely by themselves, but with much less support than they had initially planned on, for sure. So
I mean, and in terms of just kind of the threat levels that we're seeing here, obviously we, have thankfully not seen any of these groups attack the West from any of these countries, but they just seem to be continuing to slowly but surely expand. I mean, is that kind of the right characterization?
That's generally the trend, and it's especially true in the coastal West Africa timeframe. So that Burkina, or in the coastal West Africa geographic frame, rather, with Burkina Faso into, we've seen a lot of cross-border attacks into Benin, into Togo. We've seen on a more rare occasion attacks into Cote d'Ivoire, but I wouldn't rule out Cote d'Ivoire in the coming quarter either. So we see it as kind of a gradual, patient strategy among Al-Qaeda in West Africa in particular. In addition to maintaining their usual tempo of attacks in Burkina Faso, which has been quite deadly and had impacts of their own on especially the resource extraction industry, so gold mining and other other resource extractive sectors.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, what I find particularly fascinating is just kind of the tie-ins that you just laid out for how what's happening across the world in Ukraine in a very different type of conflict could really reverberate here.
Yep, and that's true not only in sub-Saharan Africa, but it could also be true in the Middle East as well. Obviously, the U.S. is putting more and more intelligence focus on Eastern Europe, particularly Ukraine and Russia, and that could have a slight deterioration in counterterrorism focus in the Middle East and North Africa. So that could also provide opportunities for Islamic State there as well. Quite frankly, all governments have finite resources, and intelligence capacity is limited. So when large events like this happen, they can provide opportunities for jihadist groups to move in.
Yeah, I mean, it really just goes to show you how truly the world is interconnected for better and worse. And I mean, these are just some of the highlights that you can find in the Threat Lens and Worldview second quarter forecast. Please visit us at stratfor.com if you want to gain more insight into any of these topics. I can promise that Charlie and I will get any cut of any new subscribers that we get. So I say this solely not for a financial gain for me, but for a intellectual and capability and awareness gain for our customers and our clients. So again, please check us out on Monday when you can read all about these and other parts of our second quarter forecast for our two main platforms, Worldview and Threat Lens. Until then, hope everybody has a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you for your time, Sam, and thanks everyone.